first of our series 3. We have been to 6 destinations and have tasted the wines from these wonderful countries. So besides traveling, we've enjoyed our palate. So tonight we're on to Israel. And Israel has a very near and dear place in my heart. Many of you know that I have family there. And actually, my first trip to Israel was in 1974, where I bought this lovely amber and silver necklace in a little shop, and the shopkeeper and I sat in the back and we drank Turkish coffee, and it was a very slow, charming way of life, which doesn't exist anymore in Israel. Israel is a first country, high tech, everything else. And then I didn't go back to Israel until 1997. Which it was a very different place, but I have been back probably 8 times. And in fact, I was supposed to go in April, but when the world fell upside down, that was the end of that trip. But I have to tell you, for a country the size of New Jersey, every time I go back, I have a new and different and wonderful, interesting experience. Either it's a place I didn't get to go the last time I was there, or was something new that didn't happen, a new dig, a new whatever. So it's just full of amazing adventures. No matter how many times you go, there's always new things to see and do. So tonight, we're very fortunate to have a dear friend, Sherry Levitin, who is CEO of Kines Tours. Sherry and I met through Virtuoso, and it was one of those meetings, you know, when you meet somebody and all of a sudden you're like, feel like you're soulmates, you know this person and it just clicks. And that's how it was when I met Sherry. And Kines has been doing tours of Israel for 50 years. So they really know every inch of this country. They're innovators in new and interesting and exciting and different ways to see Israel. And Sherry actually had been a client of theirs. She was in charge of an organization where she was planning amazing trips for large groups, for small groups, for VIPs, all kinds of things. And finally, Kines said, we need you on our side. So they made her an offer she couldn't refuse, and here she is. So I'd like to introduce you to my dear friend, Sherry Levitin. Sherry, take us to Israel.
Shalom, shalom. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here with you. And Sandy's looking at me like, what is that accent? You're American. I had to bring a little bit of Hebrew. So thank you so much for having me today, Sandy. I'm really excited. So great to see so many people today. And like she said, we're going to talk about Israel. So let's just get into it. There's so much to say. I'm going to apologize to you all up front. I decided to focus today on talking about roads less traveled. Everybody knows that going to Israel is very much, at least traditionally, been for faith-based travel, but there's so much more to do, as you've heard Sandy say. I'm also going to give you some new ideas, some great new places where you can get a good night's sleep in Israel. We're going to talk a little bit about different kinds of cultural encounters. Everybody wants to know about food. I'm deliberately staying away from wine, so we won't talk about wine, but we'll talk about other fun things to do. So let's get into it. This is Tel Aviv. This is my Tel Aviv and Jaffa. You fly in, you land, and I always go right to the beach. Nothing better to get rid of your jet lag, stretch your legs after being on these very long flights, especially you all on the West Coast. I'm in Atlanta. But this is where I go. And Sandy made a comment earlier today, and I didn't tell her, I saved it for now, but that's actually me and my daughter in the picture.
Oh, that's so sweet, Sherry.
And today is her birthday, so that's why I included it. I said, all right, Jesse, you could come to Israel with me today. So that's the two of us. But we don't just hang out in Tel Aviv. Obviously, what you heard Sandy say in terms of Tel Aviv, high tech, the stock exchange is there, 24/7 nightlife. It's really a terrific place to hang out. But personally, I like turning around, looking in the other direction from where you see us looking, and we look at Jaffa. And I wanted to introduce you from the get-go. I'm very excited to present the Jaffa Hotel, which is in Jaffa. And the reason I'm presenting it is because it is the first real goodness Marriott luxury property in Israel. So those of you who have points on Marriott, you can use it here. It has only been up and running for a couple of years. but the place where it's located has well over 4,000 years of history. If you all are not familiar with Jaffa, you can pull out any history book, including the Bible, if you will, and you know that Canaanites and Egyptians, everybody came into the Jaffa port. That was the port of entry into Israel. And now you have this beautiful hotel overlooking the port. Sandy, I wanted to show a room as well. This is the kind of room you can get at this hotel. It's just amazing views, food's great, everything's terrific. But even though you're going to get a good night's sleep in Jaffa, I don't want you to get too comfortable in one of the 120 rooms. I want you to get out day one and go to the markets. Food, 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 and honest to goodness, this is what the spice market looks like in Israel all over, but certainly in Jaffa and Tel Aviv. There's the Carmel market, the Levinsky market, where you can go on tastings. You can go to a market like this called a shuk, and you can actually buy ingredients and go back to a cooking studio with a cook and learn to whip up some really cool Mediterranean dish. So whatever your culinary interest may be in Israel, you're going to find it. Moving along, you've got graffiti tours. Art in Israel is really up and coming, and they have given in Tel Aviv, the city of Tel Aviv gave the neighborhood of Florentine to graffiti artists. So you can see graffiti just like this in the neighborhood. You can also see it in Jerusalem, but this one's my personal favorite. And you can also go on the next slide, Sandy, you can go to Nahalat Binyamin, where they have like a crafts festival. You can go shopping, buy jewelry. Of course, you don't need markets and you don't need festivals. There are plenty of great places like Ben Yehuda Street to go shopping and buy stuff for yourself or for your friends.
And I want to just jump in. I mean, Tel Aviv is a fashion capital.
Yes.
Unbelievable clothing and styling. I mean, one of the times I was there, I was ready to throw out all my clothes and just buy a whole new Israeli look.
As a matter of fact, let's stay here for 1 second. In Jaffa in particular, no, that's okay. In Jaffa in particular, there are lovely boutiques, and there are more and more up and coming entrepreneurs, fashion designers, and we even customize fashion tours. But I put this slide up because I don't want you to forget there's nightlife in Israel as well. You don't have to go touring from 9 in the morning till 6 in the evening. There are activities, sporting events. There is an opera in Israel. There are comedy clubs. There are evening performances. Hey, if you went to Spain, you'd want to see a flamenco dance or something like that. You can come and see all kinds of cultural events in Israel as well. Now, after you spend an evening out, you're going to get up early and you're going to go up the coast. And there are all kinds of cool places to stop along the way up north on the western coast. Many people stop in Caesarea or Zichron Yaakov. This, hands down, is my favorite. Akko was a port city way back when, really like thousands of years ago. It is a community that today is made up, it's about 50,000 people, made up of Jews and Muslims and Druze, Christians, Baha'i. It is just a wonderful community. And the history, as I started to say, dates back long before the Ottoman Empire to the Crusades. That's what it's most famous for, when the Crusaders came. And if you take a look at the next slide, you'll see an example of Crusader influence with the underground tunnels. So there's a lot to see underneath the city that you can't see from the port or above. And then after you do your touring and you're hungry, again, everybody's always hungry in Israel, you can go on to the outdoor markets, outdoor cafes, and they look just like this. This is
and they're right, and when you're in the tunnels, you're walking actually underneath this market.
Right. And then amazing. You come up and you can't see, but it's and the smells and the sights and the sounds are truly amazing. So this is just a fabulous, colorful, beautiful city to visit. But from there, you got to go further north again to the Carmel Mountain area, where there are many Druze villages, and I just love this view. This is actually, the host did not want to be in a picture, but very often we turn to families in the Druze villages who want to host people in their homes, and they set up a beautiful spread in this case on a porch overlooking the mountains. But we think it's very important when you go to Israel to meet real people, people who live there and have amazing stories. This particular family also has olive trees, and they make their own olive oil. So a lot of different cool things to an experience like this if you decide to take it. But Druze Village is one perspective. You got to go further north, and right up to the border of Lebanon is Rosh HaNikra. And this is kind of a weird picture, but I wanted you to see it from both angles. You were looking at a cable car that goes from the top, basically street level, all the way down to the sea. And if you see into the water, where it's green over there, the cable car goes underneath, and then you actually walk underneath the mountain through a cave, and you see the grottos. Sandy, next one. And no matter how I tried to get this crystal clear, I apologize. It's a little bit hard to say.
There must have been water on the lens, Sherry.
I don't know, darling. This is the only one I couldn't clear up. But you literally walk down a ramp right to the water. And depending on the time of day, you get the sunlight and it bounces off the water. This is one of the most amazing natural resources that the country has. It's just gorgeous up there. You forget you're on the Lebanese border. So after a long day of touring, you continue on. And I'm taking you in this photo to Tiberias. The Sophia Hotel is brand new, just opened. It is right on the Sea of Galilee. So again, Tiberias. It has 120 amazing guest rooms. And because it was at one time an Ottoman home, what you saw in the lobby, the Ottoman stone, is the real deal. The rooms, see the view of the sea, the rooms are just amazing. And if you can really make the time to hang out, they have Turkish baths and spas. Oh my gosh.
Is this up on the hill, Sherry?
It is right on the edge, right like 2 seconds from the city itself, from Tiberias.
Wow, it's beautiful.
Just on the edge of the water.
Beautiful view.
Unbelievable. Brand new, brand new.
Yeah, no, wasn't there last time. See, every time you go to Israel, there's something new.
I made sure I included new stuff today, for sure. So that is a room with a view. You get a great night's sleep, and then you get up early and you go to the banyas. Anybody can hike this. Well, every time I say hiking, people roll their eyes at me. I am not athletic whatsoever, but you go to the banyas, to the waterfalls and the trails. It's cool up there. The best time to go is in the summer, where it actually is cooler than you might realize, and people are out and about and hiking. It's gorgeous. So that's an option well off the beaten path. But another, and Sandy knows about this place, but a lot of people don't. Magdala is believed to be the birthplace of Mary Magdalene. But what a lot of people don't realize is that it's an ancient fishing village that dates back to 19 CE. I'm not a historian, but this place is cool. And after wars and all kinds of things, there was a great Jewish revolt in 73 CE. The city got covered over and it was buried. And for almost 2,000 years, it was like lost. And then archaeologists came and they started literally to unearth the city. And what you're looking at in the back square, they have found the ancient synagogue that they believe is where Mary Magdalene brought Jesus to preach. So it's a very exciting place to visit. It was a dig. They thought they'd only be doing a couple years, and here they are more than 10 years later. I think it's going on 12 actually. A very special place, again, right on the water of the Galilee. So I love it there. This is a very different kind of thing to do in Israel. A lot of people like to meet at army bases, or they want somebody to give a geopolitical briefing up north. Where you are right here in this photo is at the edge of a kibbutz called Kibbutz Malakia. And the kibbutz hosts IDF young soldiers to guard the border. They're literally called the Border Patrol. And you can go visit the kibbutz and have a meal with the soldiers. Very low key, very non-threatening. If God forbid something's going on, obviously we wouldn't send you there, but it's an unbelievably gorgeous view from high up with really young, amazingly cool soldiers. And a lot of people want to meet and talk to soldiers, and that's a great opportunity to do that.
Is that Syria in the background, Sherry?
Yes, it is. Yeah. But if that doesn't float your boat, maybe this will. We actually do, in fact, do baptisms in the Jordan River. It's not just for rafting. So a lot of our clients come and they go and want to take a spiritual time right in the Jordan River, which is very cool and fun. And for us, it's a nice alternative to bar and bat mitzvahs. This is very different and fun. And usually people go to a nice restaurant and have lunch afterwards. But if you want to do rafting, you can do rafting too. But beyond that, I wanted to throw in on the next slide, just to plant a seed. If any of you are into helicopter tours, seeing the northern part of Israel by helicopter, especially as you get towards sunset, is just an amazing experience. I never liked helicopters myself, but this one, it's beautiful, and you see the whole country like in one fell swoop. You could cover the country in no time flat. So for any of you who are adventure seekers, I highly recommend an experience like that to see the country differently. But from the north, you got to come south, and coming south, everybody comes to Jerusalem. And so this is a little bit of a different perspective than Sandy's. My favorite are the nighttime views of Jerusalem, obviously home to all of the different faiths, the three Abrahamic faiths, and there's a lot to see and do. And if any of you have heard about it but haven't done it, I highly recommend the tunnel tours at night. It's a little creepy, but it's very cool. And you literally get to go underneath the Western Wall at night and come up through the markets. So another great opportunity for those of you who like evening activities. But there's so much more to do in Jerusalem. Had to give tribute to the Jerusalem artichoke. It didn't seem right to not. Another thing that you can find in the Machane Yehuda market, and just like with Tel Aviv, plenty of opportunities for food tours and tastings. There are actually families that will let you rent out their homes and upper floors if you want private dinners, if you're having some sort of event, and that's very cool as well. So anybody who's into food, between the fine dining and cook it yourself, your options are all covered in Jerusalem as well. I wanted to share a unique experience for some of you who really want to roll up your sleeves and meet Israelis. There happens to be a jewelry store in Jerusalem called Yivel. It's the family name backwards, Levy spelled backwards. I think they actually have a store in Boston now and in Florida as well. But they have an unbelievable jewelry making class where they train young Ethiopian, mostly at-risk young women to build self-esteem, and they make jewelry and they sell the jewelry, and all the money that they get from the sale of the jewelry goes back to funding the program. So it's a very cool thing that the store owners do, and it's attracted a lot of very talented artists over the years. And so I highly recommend joining a class and talking to the girls and seeing what it's like, if that's something that you think you might be interested in. This is one of the best kept secrets ever, no joke. In Jerusalem, there is a museum. You will notice I'm not talking about museums today. There are too many to talk about, but this one I talk about. This is the Museum for Islamic Art, and they have the most unique watch collection ever. This watch allegedly was made for Queen Marie Antoinette. And it was purchased and it is on display in this museum. There had actually, you went a little too fast.
I got so excited, I double clicked.
I don't know if you could go backwards.
I don't know how to go backwards.
That's all right. Well,
we had it was a photo of a family Shabbat dinner.
Okay, okay. So pause here. So let me just finish with the watch collection.
Okay.
There had been a robbery and a lot of the watches were stolen, but fortunately they were recovered. So it's now under a much tighter security, but I strongly recommend. It's an exhibit that honestly you've never seen in your life. The next slide you saw really quick was with a family having dinner. I mentioned families that allow you to rent out their homes, but there are families who invite tourists to their homes, and I happen to just flash up the picture of what's called Shabbat of a Lifetime. You don't have to be Jewish, you don't have to be observant, but it's an opportunity to come in Jerusalem and see an authentic Shabbat dinner on a Friday night. And they bring in cooking from all different kinds of ethnic groups. So you're not just having my grandmother's matzo ball soup, you are having different delicacies from the Moroccan countries, Yemenite, could be French, could be Russian. And so again, a very cool, different culinary experience you might want to try.
I took a group to Israel in, it was 2017, and we had a Shabbat dinner that was included in it. And it actually was an amazing Holocaust story, the family that was hosting, but the group was not a Jewish group. It was totally mixed. And I can tell you the people who participated in the dinner who weren't Jewish were, I mean, that was one of the highlights of the tour. So it really is a very interesting experience. It's not just, you know, kind of like your mother's, like you said, like Bubby's chicken soup.
Like Bubby. Well, and I appreciate you saying that, because I think it's really important. And I have to just put in a little bit of a plug, especially today being the day where El Al flew a direct flight to Abu Dhabi. I mean, it's just today was the first time they could fly directly from Tel Aviv to the UAE. It was a 3-hour flight. Normally to go there, you'd have to go around and make it 8 hours. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because more and more we're finding not only North American tourists, but even Israelis, the cultural aspects of what goes on, not just in Israel, but the Middle East, whether it's the food, the history, the religion, the culture, all that is just very interesting to everybody. And so there are many, many opportunities, regardless of whether you have faith or don't, to just learn about the history of the land. And so thank you, Sandy, because everybody can learn something from any of these experiences. Moving right along, I don't know how many of you have ever been in a stalactite or stalagmite cave, but I was shocked to find out that they exist in Israel. And these caves, you know, what you're looking at here with the stalactites is all natural, obviously, over thousands of years. These caves, you know, Jews in particular had been on the run fleeing from Romans. This one happens to be in the Judean hills, and there is some evidence that people hid out in these caves. So it's kind of a cool and different thing as you leave Jerusalem. Again, in the heat of the summer, it's a very literally cool place to be. And so if you're into that kind of thing with natural formations, and like Sandy said, how is it that Israel is so tiny, the size of New Jersey, and has all of these cool different things in there? You just got to go see it for yourself. So that is the Sorek Cave. Everybody goes to the Dead Sea. You got to go to the Dead Sea. And if you can see the pillars leading out to this umbrella, all that white stuff is salt. So it's really true. You can float. You cannot sink. If you've never been able to swim before, don't worry. You're going to float on the Dead Sea. Of course, there's still plenty to offer in terms of mud baths, and you can buy Dead Sea products. But one of my favorite places to visit, and no matter how many times I'm in Israel, is definitely the Dead Sea. But from there, you're a hop, skip, and a jump away from Masada. And I love this view of Masada because people don't realize, like, oh my gosh, like it's in the middle of nowhere. And look at how flat it is. And you could even see the path, see that white squiggly line. If you want to climb Masada, you can climb it. I've done it.
I did that in 74. We got up at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning because there was no cable car and it was too hot to kind of, you know, do it in the daytime. So with flashlights, we did that whole thing.
And it's still one of the most popular ways to see it, literally, is to go up at the crack of dawn and watch the sun come up from the top. So people,
the most beautiful sunrise I've ever seen in my whole life. And I've been to 71 countries. was still the sunrise over the Jordan Hill at the top of Masada. I mean, it was just breathtaking.
There's something about it. So I would have been remiss if I didn't include it. But if you're going to be in that part of Israel, hey, you know, if you've never done it, even though Israelis get mad at me, they're like, why do you talk about camels? We've moved beyond camels. But a lot of people, especially if you want to understand the history and the culture, having a traditional Bedouin experience, whether it's a camel ride or a Bedouin dinner in a Bedouin tent with, as you said, Sandy, Turkish coffee, you've got to do it at least once. And it's fun, as long as you get in front of the camel so it doesn't spit on you. That's it. Just, you only have to worry about spitting. Anyway, so that's that. Most people never go as far as the Machtesh. Mitzpeh Ramon, the Ramon crater. It was a naturally formed crater. It did not occur because of a meteor. That's a misunderstanding. It's through the natural evolution and the rains or the whatever. It's a natural formation, but there's so much you can do at the crater. People don't realize we've got Jeep tours and ATV rides, and you can go rappelling. Not that I've ever wanted to go rappelling, but if you want to go rappelling, you could go rappelling. And if you're really daring, Sandy, go to the next one, please. You can go sandboarding.
Oh, wow.
At this unbelievable sand dune, the Kasui sand dune. The real thing, young people on these things that look like surfboards, and they come down. Now, if you can't sandboard, you can hike up, you can get on one of those little sled-like things, you know, those flyer things that people used to sit on in the snow, the round thing, and you can slide down. There are many opportunities to enjoy sand dunes, and we show up with plenty of water, so not to worry. But that's something that, again, people may want to consider. This is the newest and latest and greatest thing. I don't know why, it's a male thing, I think, but the owner of my company decided that he needed to buy a bunch of Yamaha motorcycles. That's for another time. And we are now the only company where we actually do desert tours and other places around Israel on motorcycle. So if you're somehow associated with a motorcycle club, or you want to join a tour, if you've got a license, you can actually see the country on motorcycle. People have done it on bike before, you know, from coast to coast on bicycles, but not on motorcycles. And I got to tell you, even though I'm, you know, making fun a little bit, I don't have a license, I can't drive, but I'm a very good passenger. I even have a helmet. And so I said, all right, well, let's see what this is all about. And I got to tell you, it was awesome. So if helicopters isn't your thing, maybe motorcycles will be your thing. It is definitely worth a try. And when you're pooped out and exhausted, you really need to end up at this place. The Six Senses is an IHG brand new luxury hotel. It is stunning. It hasn't even opened yet. It's still on track to open. It was opening in November of 2020. I think they're going to hold off till December, but they're already taking reservations. And not only is it just gorgeous views of the Negev, but you also have access, like some of the things I was just talking about earlier. They offer the most amazing stargazing activity at night. You can be in a room, and if you don't feel like going out and doing stargazing, you could do it right off your own balcony with a private pool if you want. But they have infinity pools and gyms and all kinds of just unbelievably beautiful things, and amazing food. They actually did a tasting earlier in the year, and the food that they're serving, all natural, healthy kind of stuff, very spa-like. So it is a gorgeous new place to try. So Sandy, you haven't tried this one either.
Well, that was part of my trip in April, because they were inviting travel advisors to come and be the guinea pigs. They were supposed to open originally in May. And so when I was at ILTM, the International Luxury Travel Market, I was invited to come as a guest in April. And then, of course, you know, everything changed and everything got pushed back. But for those of you that don't know, Six Senses is a group of the most gorgeous high-end spas all over the world in the most breathtaking places. So this is their newest location, and they just do what no one else does in the wellness sector. So I can't wait to go.
That's great. Great. Thank you for sharing that. I wanted to pull it all together and just bring it back to this last slide. You know, we jumped into Tel Aviv and Jaffa, but it's worth taking just one quick step back to say that, as with other tour companies, we really do our best. We work with Sandy. She makes sure that she understands your needs, what you're trying to achieve. But when you get to Israel, if you need any kinds of airport services, private transfers, airport VIP, assistance with luggage, or if you happen to be the kind of traveler where you say, listen, I'm ready to try Israel. I'm coming back. I'm a little bit nervous about this whole COVID thing. You know, I'm not ready to stay in a hotel. I'm not ready. We also have access to luxury apartments and villas. So if that's something that you want to talk with Sandy and me about, we'd be happy to. We bring to the villas and the apartments on-site 24/7 concierge services. So let's say if you're with a family and you need a babysitter because the adults want to go out to a restaurant, we'll bring you a babysitter. If you want us to do your laundry, we do your laundry. So not only is there touring and cool things to see and do, but how you choose to tour around Israel, where you choose to stay, who you stay with, and how you create your own customized package is completely up to you, obviously with our help. So I wanted to just finish up with that. I know I spoke very quickly. I was so worried that I would run out of time. I apologize.
Oh, you did a fabulous job, Sherry. Does anybody have any questions for Sherry?
Somebody asked a question about Yivel. I just saw
Yivel
does have a website, and if you can't find it, I will make sure I send the link to Sandy. So not to worry about that. Any specific questions about anything I did or did not cover?
Michaela?
Thanks. I couldn't find the chat button fast enough.
Oh.
I've never been there before. I love the spice markets and all. Can't wait to do that. But I also am really curious about the Israeli-Palestinian connections and what's okay, what's not okay, to get a better on the ground understanding. I think, so I'm curious about, I understand that this is all about Israel, but since we're neighbors, we might be friends, maybe yes, maybe no, but I would just like to understand that better.
I think that's a fabulous question. I'm glad you asked it. I never know if it's going to come up or not. There are 3 different ways to answer your question, so I'll try to keep it short.
1, 2, 3.
First and foremost, Israel is a place where even my close family and friends, I say, listen, I don't think it's a good idea to rent a car and drive around. You can save that for somewhere in Europe. You don't want to do it in Israel because if you don't know where you're going, you don't want to end up in the wrong neighborhood. So I say that to everybody up front. But that said, that's my first point. But that said, my second point is the way tourism works in Israel is very different to the way it works in other countries. We have a direct pipeline to the Ministry of Tourism, which is also connected to the arm of the Israel Defense Forces. So when you're touring, every morning, there's like a check-in, you know, through an app on what's going on in the country. If there was any unrest, any noise, no matter where it is, you might wake up, Michaela, one morning and you think you're going south and your guide says to you, hey, everybody, good morning. We're going up north today. And you're like, we're not supposed to. And they're like, we're going up north today. And we reroute you. And so many clients say, and this is the third point, when is my itinerary final? And I always say, the day you're doing it, because we just never know. But the good news is that the unrest, when there's unrest, it's predictable. They know it's coming. And we know where to and not to take you. And almost, I mean, all of the places I just showed you through this presentation, you could go to any day of the week. I didn't tell you to go to the Overlook looking at Gaza. We didn't go to certain places in East Jerusalem, let's say, but for the most part, tourism in Israel has been on the rise the last 2 years in a row. 18 and 19 were banner years, and people are coming. So,
Okay, well, so I apologize for my ignorance.
not at all. How would you know?
Israel and Palestine are two very different concepts in my mind, and perhaps I'm ignorant, but I heard you talk about Israel, not Palestine. And I understand the East City and stuff like that, but so I guess we can talk about it later offline.
Well, let me jump in for a second. I think maybe, and I don't know, I don't know if I'm answering or getting the question you're answering, but Sherry, I know that there are lots of, you know, where you can go to Arab and Israeli, you know, villages. I know when you go to Bethlehem, and you know what Sherry said, every time you have an itinerary that takes you to Bethlehem, you never know until the morning of if you're really going to go. But I've had in the past, and I know Sherry can do this, you know, you go to Bethlehem and then you have lunch with a Palestinian family and stuff. So there are a lot of cross-cultural things that go on in Israel, and they can definitely be included in any tour, because there are, I mean, you know, it makes it sound like they don't talk to each other. You know, maybe the governments don't talk to each other, but the people do.
Well, and that's my point. The world would be different.
Absolutely.
Right.
Well, one of the things we didn't talk about is the fact that we do extensions to Jordan all the time, all the time, and to Egypt all the time. Before COVID, the most popular flights from the States were Turkish Air via Istanbul flying into Israel. So, you know, none of that is a problem. So I apologize if I misunderstood your question. We don't drive into the West Bank because we don't tour in the West Bank, but if you on your own had, you know, for some reason to go, we actually do, in fact, do tours. We do a lot of interfaith tours with all kinds of student groups or political groups where we can actually arrange visits into the West Bank if that's something you wanted to do.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Any other questions? Sherry, thank you so much. This was fabulous. It was really, really great.
I have one really quick question.
Oh, go ahead, Katie. Yes.
Sorry, no, sorry. I'm jumping. I think I might have dipped into the wine a little too soon.
Oh, no. We get to drink from 5 o'clock on.
Okay. Well, I believe in morning and breakfast beverages as well, but that's different.
Okay, good.
So my question for you just is more of a logistical question, and I guess there's two parts of it. One is, what time of the year do you recommend as being the best time to travel to Israel? And then the other one would be, how long in advance would you recommend starting to plan a vacation to Israel?
Thank you. But you asked a little bit of a trick question.
Yeah.
In terms of the best time to go, I don't like rain. I'm just not a rain person. So I avoid Israel, if I can, between sort of mid to late November and mid-February. But that's because I don't like rain. That said, I've had to go on business many times during those months, and I've had gorgeous weather. So everybody says to me, stop saying that about the rain.
I'm more worried about the heat.
So the heat, so I live in Atlanta, Georgia, and no joke now, the heat in Atlanta in August with the humidity is worse than it is in Israel. I kid you not. There's air conditioning everywhere in all the vehicles, all the hotels, all the restaurants. So you're not out in the dead heat, 12 noon, whatever. If you have to be outside, you have to wear your hats and your sunglasses and bring your sunscreen and all that good stuff. But there really isn't a bad time to go. There is a seasonality the last 2 weeks of the calendar year, Christmas, New Year's, very crowded, not good. If you don't like crowds, don't go then. It's just very crowded because of all of the faith-based touring. August, because Europe is basically off in August, August is very, very crowded. And depending on the year, mid-September to mid-October with the Jewish holidays, Israelis are basically not working. So they're all over the place. So I don't recommend going then either. I'd also be careful around Easter and Passover because those are very big pilgrimage holidays. So any other time though, you're good to go.
The spring and fall, the temperature is probably more in the mid 70s to high 80s. So if you're sensitive about the heat, I mean, if you're going to be there June, July, and August, it is going to be hot. So if you're a little concerned about the heat, I would recommend the spring and fall. But again, avoid that week or two where you have high holidays coming in, or Easter or Passover, because the country basically shuts down. The high holidays or Easter, Passover is kind of like being here at Christmas time, Christmas and New Year's. Everything's shut down because everybody's all over the place. So if it's temperature wise, I have been there in November, December. I was actually there one year for New Year's. And it's cold. It can be cold. It can be very cold in Jerusalem. It can actually even snow occasionally. But if you like the cool weather, and you're not going to have, if you take away the New Year's Eve and Christmas time, and if you'd rather tour in cool weather and you don't mind wearing a jacket and stuff, you're not going to have as many crowds, and it's going to be pretty fabulous. So
January can be great. January after, if you don't mind the cold, January after the holidays is a wonderful time to travel there. And you can get some nice warm weather as well, like warm being in the 50s, even in January.
All right, I'm looking at the time.
I know you all
it's been going on. It was great. So Sherry, thank you again.
Thank
and
you all.
any
Enjoy
questions,
your
we'll be happy to answer more. So I want to get on to, I think we're going to go over time a little bit, so I hope that's okay for everybody today. So now we're going to go, we've seen all these gorgeous pictures. Sherry didn't show us any of the wine growing regions because we left that for Warren. So now we're going to taste some wonderful Israeli wines. It's amazing. So many of the winemakers have been trained at Davis and everything. I mean, the wine growing industry in Israel is way beyond Manischewitz. So for those of you who are new, I'm going to give a little intro to Warren. Warren is a dear friend of mine and an amazing purveyor of the most interesting, fabulous wines from around the world. And we teamed up together to do these travel and wine tasting series. And I know many of the people have said, what wonderful wine experiences they've had from all these countries. Even people who are wine enthusiasts didn't know some of the things with Warren. Warren came from a very corporate, he had his own consulting practice, but wine was his passion. And like me, Warren did the same thing. He left the corporate world and followed his passion. And thank you, Warren, for doing that, because we're all benefiting from your amazing experience and your incredible taste in wine. So I'm going to turn this over to my dear friend, Warren Engel, and let's taste some of these delicious grapes from Israel.
Well, thank you, Sandy. I appreciate it. I think Manischewitz is actually a New York wine.
I know.
but it is interesting. Somebody saw my post. I mean, Sherry, that's a great presentation. I was like, I'm such a bad Jew. I'm like, my sister lives in Tel Aviv and I've never been to Israel.
Oh, Warren.
I know, it's terrible. I see Jeannie's like really got smoke coming out of her ears. But so anyway, you can transport yourself a little bit to Israel tonight with some physical manifestations of our trip here with some lovely wine.
Oh, I know where it is.
As some of you have been on previous calls, I do find it ironic that places like South Africa are considered New World when they've been making wine since the 1600s, and Israel and Lebanon and other places are considered New World wines when they've been making wines there since the beginning of civilization in the Fertile Crescent.
I mean, good grief.
It's quite ironic that the Europeans and their thoughts around wine. But I think it would be fair to say that Israeli wines historically, and wines generally from the southern Mediterranean, haven't been world class for quite some time. And however, in the last 20 years or so, the wines coming out are particularly northern Israel, where, you know, in the Galilee, where these wines are from, actually both from the Golan Heights, even further north there, as you get into Lebanon. In fact, some of the greatest wines in the world come from Lebanon. There's a winery called Chateau Mazur in Lebanon that makes wines that you would swear came right out of the top estates in Bordeaux. You know, the Golan Heights winery with Yarden. Now, Yarden makes all kinds of wines. They make wines that, you know, the so-called Tuesday night supermarket wines that are very, very inexpensive. But they also have these wines that we're drinking tonight, which are a much more elevated quality of wine from high elevation. You've heard me say in the past that high elevation is great for wine because it's very, very, you know, you get those cool nights and those very warm days. The diurnal fluctuation, grapes really love. I love wines that come out of volcanic soil, the essence of minerality, the roots of the rock fighting for every drop of water, which gives great fruit intensity. Great. But here we have two very, very different kind of wines. We have a very European style red wine and a very California style white wine, interestingly enough. I was quite impressed with both of these wines tonight. I hope you were too. The Chardonnay transports me right to the Russian River. It's a high quality Chardonnay, 100% Chardonnay. It's a wine that's made with malolactic fermentation, which is that process that converts malic acid into lactic acid. The malic acid is a very tart acid that is very present in a lot of grapes, particularly Riesling and others, that you really want that great acidity. It's very tart acidity. Most people don't like that in Chardonnay, so it goes through malolactic fermentation through the addition of some controlled bacteria, and that's where you get that really rich, warm flavor and mouth profile of the Chardonnay. Some people call it oaky and buttery. This one has that, but not overwhelmingly so like some of the crazy ones in California.
Well, and as I let you do.
Someone have a... So, and then the red wine is also, it's 100% Cabernet Sauvignon, which is...
Sensible.
Yeah.
And it's the wine is beautiful. As I said, it's a very European style wine. It goes 18 months in French oak barrels, 40% of which I think are new. It's got that beautiful, typical Cabernet profile of dark black fruit.
I haven't had any kind of day like yours, but it's
Oh,
been
wow.
good.
But also the great essence of
I find myself just wanting her to do, I know she knows how to do it. And she's just like, this is,
somebody,
and so I said, well,
everybody.
she says, well, I don't remember the instructions. And so then you have to view the instructions and
So
you have to
and
view
the
adamantly
is just again a beautiful wine. It's got those leathery notes.
just
It's
thought, okay, well, you know,
chocolate flavor to it. I think this
Barbara
wine,
Kimport, you're not muted. We can all hear you.
I just muted her.
we can, you know, it's a really beautiful. I'm sorry, it was a bit distracting. It's a really beautiful wine that I think will benefit from age. In fact, I think both of these wines would benefit from some bottle aging. So my recommendation, if you like these wines, if you know someone who could sell you more, you should try and get some more and lay them down, because I think they're both going to improve over time. But anyway, that's enough from me. I mean, that's just sort of the, you know, the overall description of the wines. I happen to like them very much. I'll be honest with you. I wasn't expecting to like them as much as I did, because I think like many people, you know, I've had these wines, similar wines. I've not had these two particular ones specifically. They were highly recommended to me, and I am pleasantly surprised. I was a bit nervous that I'd be disappointed, and that some of you might be, but I would be surprised if any of you are disappointed in these wines. So let me hear if anyone is disappointed or not, because I've had some of their higher end wines that can go into the several hundreds of dollars, and I thought they were astonishingly good. And I must say, these wines, I think, deliver a lot in the glass and are really super value. Anyone? Matt's clapping. You like these, Matt?
Yeah, why don't you unmute yourselves now if you have a question or a comment on the wine, that would be great.
I do like them, Lauren, and I like the Chardonnay now that it's warmed up a little bit. It's delicious.
That's a good point, Matt. In fact, I think Lori was asking me today about temperature, and I think we've discussed this before. I'm of the opinion, as are many others, that generally people drink white wines too cold and red wines too warm.
I've told you
White wine gets too cold unless it's like a Chablis or a Champagne, which can benefit from that coldness. Most wines, and this wine particularly, if it's too cold, it's going to suppress a lot of the flavor profile. And I think you're right, Matt. As it's come to temperature in the glass, probably running 58, 60 degrees in the glass, I think it's just a very pleasant wine. And for those of you who cooked, I understand Ginger and Lori cooked. I delivered wine to Lori today and almost stayed there to do this call.
You lucky. Would have been nice.
But when she heard I had cholera, not COVID, she decided to make me go home. But,
Lori, what did you make?
Oh my God. Oh, wait. Right. So Lori and David made the falafels
Oh,
with apricots and dates. And I brought the mushroom, boracus, and some tzatziki sauce, and the chicken with pistachios and sesame seeds.
wow.
mm.
So, Lori, did you fry or did you bake the falafel?
I ended up frying them.
Uh-huh.
I fried them, and just because I just thought old school,
Yeah, I was just curious because they're usually fried. I was just curious if anyone baked them to see if they came out as good as she said they were going to be.
Yeah, and I made them, I did my chickpeas dried. I soaked them 24 hours from Rancho Gordo. If anybody doesn't know that bean company, just get all your beans from that place. It's beautiful. And anyway, the chickpeas, I soaked them overnight, 24 hours, and then added, and Ginger says they have some kick. And the sauce she put on the chicken has kick. So I said this the Cabernet Sauvignon almost tastes kind of spicy. She said that's the leftover flavor in my mouth.
It does have some spicy notes to it.
Okay.
This wine has great complexity to it, and it's a very Bordeaux style, left bank Bordeaux style of cab. The leathery notes and just, I think, a gorgeous wine. I'm curious, Stan, you're a big Bordeaux guy. What do you think of this red?
I totally agree with you, but it's very unusual to have 100% Cabernet taste like a Bordeaux blend, which is, 3 or 4, usually 4 different grapes. And so I'm very impressed. And
yeah, I'm wondering if that's a consequence of the high altitude volcanic soil, that essence of terroir coming through, that's giving it a little bit of that minerality that we're used to in Bordeaux, even a little bit of sort of like the Rutherford dust we get here in Napa. I happen to love dirt in my wine, and the dusty notes and flavors. And I tell you, I am
that could be the tannin also.
quite impressed with this wine.
It's really good.
Warren?
Way past my expectation. Yeah.
Warren, are Chardonnay and Cabernet sort of the typical examples of varietals that are grown in Israel, or are there other typical things that you would see?
I think you see a lot of Cab and a lot of Chardonnay. I think there are a couple of reasons. One, the grapes grow very, very well
Jeff's hair's getting long.
in that climate.
My
Also,
brother-in-law, his hair's getting really
you'll
long.
probably see more Chardonnay and Cab from places like Israel and others, South
58.
Africa, in the United States, because it's very popular and it's what sells. But there are many, many other grape varietals that they're growing up there as well. And they're even experimenting with Riesling and some others. But Cab and Chardonnay, and even into, as I said, Chateau Mazur from Lebanon is a Cab that is astounding. MASUR. If you ever found Chateau Mazur, jump all over it. I mean, they're very expensive. They can run up to the hundreds of dollars a bottle, but they're extraordinary wines. So they tend to do very, very well. And the Italian varietals, because again, the the soil doesn't know that someone put a line in the sand and said, Israelis over here and Syrians over there and Lebanese over there and Greeks there and French there. The grapes don't know. So, the varietals, it's just, the Golan Heights and northern Israel, southern Lebanon, Klimat, as the French say, is not dramatically different from southern Italy or Croatia or Greece or even the south of France to a certain extent.
And there are a lot of really small wineries, and some of them actually have small guest houses, so you can actually stay at the winery. It's really lovely. And it's, because it's up and cool, like Warren said, it's just lovely temperature.
Yeah, it's not unknown for them to be picking grapes with the light dusting of snow in an early winter there in late October, if it hadn't been a very warm summer. And then for those of you who are looking for kosher wines for Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur or even for Pesach, I tell you, I'm going to do a promo on these wines to anyone who wants kosher wine. I believe, I'm a Reformed Jew. I believe all wine is kosher. And if the Beth Din doesn't like it, I'll write him a check. So
what makes a wine kosher?
The Beth Din. You write it to the Beth Din.
Well, basically also all the people who work producing the wine and everything else have to be Sabbath observant.
Yeah, there are a whole host of things, Stan, but I mean, there's this great story in South Africa that every year before Pesach, the Coca-Cola plant would shut down for 2 hours for the rabbis from the Beth Din to come in, make a brocha, accept the check from the Coca-Cola company, they turn the machines back on, and everything subsequent to that for 2 days was kosher for Passover. So
Kosher Coca-Cola?
The actual process of making the process of making the Coca-Cola or the matzah, it's done under rabbinic supervision. There are certain protocols that are required for regular kosher wine. Now, mevushal kosher wine, which Jamie and I know a lot about because for the Hebrew Free Loan Association, when we do the gala, we have to have mevushal kosher wine, which is the nth degree of kosher, and you have to boil the wine. I don't think that the Sanhedrin 5,000 years ago were worried about boiling the wine or having the rabbis make a brocha. They made their wine and it was kosher because they were
and they probably drank it out of lead vessels,
Yeah, exactly. So look, and look, I don't want to. I'm sort of, my sense of humor. It's a little black and a little dark, as those of you who know me. But it's, obviously those of us who are Jewish and who are observant and who want kosher wine, these wines are kosher and they're made in that tradition. Those of us who aren't quite as stringent in terms of our kashrut, it's a big world. So for those people who are a little bit more flexible, I think these aren't mevushal, but they're kosher. For those of you who want to drink wine on Rosh Hashanah that comes from Champagne, that's not kosher. I don't know that lightning bolts are going to come out of the sky. But if you're observant and that's important to you, that's to be respected. And there are wines that are appropriate for you.
Does the kosher wine taste like this Cabernet?
Kosher wine, absolutely.
That is kosher.
So it's kosher in the sense that it's made according to the laws of kashrut, as Sandy says. Everybody observes Shabbat and that kind of thing. That the grapes.
This is extremely good. This is better than any kosher wine I've had. So
So no, I don't know that's necessarily kosher.
Judy's been raising her hand for a while. Judy.
Yeah. Well, I told Sandy when she sent us these wines that I was disappointed that it was Yarden, because I've tasted a lot of Israeli wine. And I have also had Yarden that sold a lot of places here for Passover and for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. I happen to be very pleasantly surprised with these, but I wanted to tell those people that don't care about kosher or may not be Jewish that if you like fun visits to wineries like we used to be able to do in the 80s and 90s up in Napa and Sonoma, where you'd actually meet the vintners.
Yes.
They would pour you their glasses out of their refrigerator like I remember some of the famous ones used to do for us. go to Israel and take a wine tour. I bet Sherry runs them too, but I've had them led by Israeli friends, and it's absolutely incredible to go up. The Golan Heights is one part, but also in the Galilee and up in the other mountains on the other side of Metula, up near Lebanon. There are absolutely incredible wineries, and the majority of the winemakers that we met in some of these tours were actually trained at Sonoma State or at Davis. And they brought a lot of the learning of how we make the best of the California wines to Israel, and using their terrific terroir and climat to make these incredible wines. And so, take advantage of it. It's such a small country. You can cover a lot of wineries in a very short amount of time and see beautiful, beautiful country.
What Judy
thank
said
you,
is so
Judy.
true,
You're
because
absolutely right.
one of the wineries that we visited, when we went into the tasting room, I mean, we were there with the winemaker and his wife and the little daughter who was sitting in the high chair. And, they were telling us the story, and there was this very interesting story about I think it was his grandfather who was a spy. And, I mean, there's like, these stories go on. It's just amazing. And, here we were there with them, with the little baby and the whole thing, drinking the wine and in their, in their home kind of thing. And then they also had a couple little cottages that you could stay if you wanted. So what Judy is saying about these being, kind of the old time, 60s, 70s experience in Napa is what you get in Israel. It's so charming and so wonderful and so Hamish, for those of you that know the word.
Yeah, it's kind of like Italy's the same way. Tuscany's a little different, but if you go to Piemonte and the Veneto and Campania and other places in Italy, they say Jews and Italians have similar cultural affinity for gathering people together, and it's absolutely true. A lot of the winemakers in Israel trained here in California, and a lot of them are made aliyah from great winemaking places. A lot of really, really high-level wineries in Israel that were started by South Africans.
Yeah.
A lot of South Africans immigrated to Israel, and they brought the techniques and the skills of South Africa, which is world class, to that as well. So I'm glad you like the wines. As I said, this is not the entry level wines from Yarden. This is sort of their upper level, mid to upper level tier wines. They actually have some single vineyard designate wines that are of even higher quality, as I said, that I'm quite familiar with. That are also, they're a little bit, that's north of $100 a bottle, but from a value standpoint, considering what you'd have to pay in France or Napa, these wines, I think, really over-deliver in the bottle.
Oh, it's
Eileen,
not
I see Eileen's dad has his hand up.
Wine.
I'm sorry, maybe you said.
Eileen dad, I'm sorry, I forgot your name. Eileen's dad. Go ahead, ask Warren a question.
Yeah, thank you, Sandy, and thank you, Warren. I have a question. Here in Los Angeles, we get a lot of wine which are by Hermon and Yarden that was mentioned. These are not high-end wines, obviously, but I just want to see what you think about Hermon as well as Yarden.
Well, I think Hermon and Yarden, these are very big brands. They're sort of like Yalumba in Australia, or some of the larger California producers, or like in Europe, like a Banfi in Tuscany, for example. So they're really big. The wines are ubiquitous. You'll find them everywhere. So, and they have wines that will be $10 a bottle that you'll find in Trader Joe's, and then you'll find wines like these, which will be more in a sort of a specialty wine store from places like me. And then there are the ones that go into high-end restaurants. So I think when looking at a large commercial winery like a Yarden, they must make, I think they make over 100 different wines under different labels. I mean, the Yarden label alone, I think, has 20 or 20 different wines if you go to the website. So I think it's really important to really understand what you like and experiment with it. And generally, price is somewhat of a guide. It doesn't mean, if you're paying $75 to $100 for a bottle of wine, you can expect that it's going to be of good quality. I would say Napa can be an exception to that rule. But also, just because you're paying $15 or $20 for a wine doesn't mean that it's not going to be a good wine. If you get a an artisanal producer that's a little less well known and doesn't have the brand cachet and value, they can't get the premium for their wine. So I think the thing, what we specialize in Duvan is finding more artisanal producers, more small, more family-owned producers. It's not that easy to get those Israeli wines in the United States, because what tends to get imported from countries like Israel or Greece or South Africa are the larger, more popular brands, and most of the really, really high-end wines are consumed locally. But that's why when we were looking for Israel and Sandy asked me, I went to some of the people whom I trust, including my master som, Peter Neptune. He introduced me to the Yarden rep, and we spent a lot of time talking about these wines. And this is where we landed, because of course we have a budget for the series. But I have had, as I said, at a tasting, the single vineyard high-end Yarden wines, and they are world-class, as good as anything out there.
Okay, any other questions for Warren or for Sherry?
I thought I saw Mimi wanting to say something earlier.
I was just going to say, it's not that expensive. I went online. I mean, I actually just now looked up the 17 vintage, and you can get it for, $21, $22 or maybe more, but depending upon where you get it from and how much they're going to charge for shipping, of course. But it's not a very expensive wine.
No. These are not. As I said,
think this is the value for what it.
That's what I said. This definitely over delivers. You get bang for your buck with this wine for sure.
Yeah.
I think that's one of, Warren's not saying it, and I'll say it for him. I think that's one of Warren's brilliance, is that he's able to source these incredible wines from these unusual places. And you get amazing value for the price of whatever. And Warren just has an amazing palate and amazing knowledge. And so getting wines through Warren, I think you get amazing value for whatever you do purchase through him. That's my commercial break, but it's true.
I'd like to just let everybody know that there's a late harvest that they make that is fabulous.
Is it Yarden?
Yarden. We bought it when we were at Yarden, and it was good enough when we got it, because it was something small that I could travel with.
Right.
And I brought it home, and we had, I think it was a Semillon, and I actually ordered a couple of bottles from them, and they do ship to the States. They're, it's $40 a bottle or something like that, but it's fabulous.
Oh, great. Thank you.
For a split.
Anybody else? All right, well, we've gone over a little bit, so thank you all for indulging the extra time. It was well worth it. Sherry, thank you for a fabulous whirlwind tour through Israel. Warren, I think everybody's been very impressed with these selections. It's been great. So next week is Greece, and it'll be Tuesday night. You'll get all the emails about it, but it will be Tuesday night because Monday is Labor Day. So, and I think that works well for Barbara, whose first Monday night doesn't work. So anyway, we'll be having emails.
Yes. One thing about next week is we have a special treat for those of you who were with us. I think Sherry.
Austria.
When we drank Austrian wines, we had Master Sommelier, my friend Jesse Becker, talking to us about the Fitzwinninger wines. Well, Jesse will be back with us next Tuesday to talk about the Greek wines, both of which were his personal recommendations. Again, I know Sandy says, I know everything about wine and every single wine in the world. It's a little bit of Trumpian hyperbole there. But
I'm your biggest fan, Warren.
But in fairness, while I do know a number of wines, these two were specifically and personally selected by Jesse based on what we've done with the tasting series and budget. So I've had the wines. I think they're terrific. But Jesse will be with us next week to talk about the wines.
Yeah. So if you were with us for Austria, you remember how charming Jesse was too. So, and incredibly knowledgeable. I mean, a master sommelier, there aren't that many around. So we're very fortunate to have that. So it's going to be a very exciting, and I've got some great Greek, authentic Greek recipes that will be going, that they sent me from Greece to go specifically with the wines. So I think it's going to be a really interesting session next week, and I'm looking forward to it, and I'm looking forward to seeing as many of you that can make it. So the invitation email will probably go out. I don't know if it doesn't go out tomorrow, it'll go out Wednesday at the latest. So I look forward to seeing all of you, and thank you again, Sherry, for a fabulous time, and Warren for picking incredible wines. And we'll see you all next week. So in the meantime, have a great week, have a great Labor Day weekend, and just take care, stay healthy, and wear that mask. It saves lives. Bye, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank you.
Oh, our pleasure.
I didn't